on crime, abortion, and unwantedness. I'm Bryce Johnson.
I'm DeAndre Campbell.
Okay, so basically what this article is about is it addresses the correlation between abortion and decreased crime levels, and whether abortions decrease crime levels or whether they have no correlation. And it goes into detail with teenage abortions, and it addresses teenage abortions as well as older mothers' abortions and the effect of both of those on crime rates. So it explains the difference between abortion numbers between teenagers, adults in the 20s and the 30s. So whether teenagers have higher abortion rates, or 20s have higher abortion rates, or 30s have higher abortion rates, they go into those numbers, and then they see those implications on crime rates. It displays the difference between numbers on criminal activity of children from older mothers and teenage mothers. So it looks to see if children from older mothers have a higher crime rate than teenage mothers, or if kids from teenage mothers have a higher crime rate than older mothers. It looks at teenage birth rates and abortions across multiple states. So it looks on a state level to see the results from multiple different studies, and it analyzes data from that state level so that they can continue to see that trend between the different states. Research. So the previous research that they gathered yielded results that basically teenage abortion has an intensely positive effect on crime rates and abortion rates that are much higher in teenage mothers. So teenage mothers are much more likely to have children that will participate in criminal activity when they get older, and older mothers are much less likely to have children that participate in criminal activity. So that means that if you're a teenager and you have an abortion, that means that there's a positive effect on the crime rates. So if you have an abortion, the crime rates are bound to go down if you're a teenager. And there's a lot of previous research that they gathered by the DL panel data, Rasanen, and Henshaw Coast, talking about pregnancy and crime rates and teenage pregnancy and how those both affect crime rates. The study's trying to see if there's a trend between different studies over the years and if the trends have changed. So they take data from multiple different studies from those different researchers, and they're trying to see, and they give commentary throughout the study as to whether the different studies, the trends change over time, and if the data is changing, and so on. And so the study is a lot different because it utilizes research from multiple researchers, and it draws conclusions from all of them to see their results.
As you can see, they use several data methods. They use the IV and DV for a majority of the tables, but they also include the figures also. Their IV was the amount of abortions, and the DV was the amount of criminal activity. And in an experiment, the IV is always the variable that is being manipulated or changed, the thing that's going up and down. The DV is always the thing that's being measured. So the tables that they used on table 1 was Rasanen et al. Statistically odds ratio. The crime factors are ranked accordingly to violent crimes at odds ratios, and then by non-violent crimes odds ratios. For table 2, it was DL, U.S. National Panel data, modes of violent and property crime. DL is Donahue and Levitz. The bottom 2 panels don't report the coefficients for the 8 control variables that we're seeing. Table 3 disaggregate models and first differences. So across the 50 states, they use the states that were ranked by statistical significance. Table 4, they used teenagers 15 through 19 weighted abortion ratios for states ranked by significance levels. So basically, each state's abortion ratio equals the abortion ratio or birth rate plus abortion rate. For table 5, they also use DLUS National Panel data models of violent and property arrest, So the first differences that were used when effective abortion rates were also used in the other first differences also. Um, as you could see, there's a significant link between crime and abortion. So due to varying concentrations of teenage abortions across states and not unwantedness, all the evidence is mutually supportive. DL's conclusions about abortion apply much more to teenagers than adult women, who now account for more than 80% of U.S. abortions. The odds of a child from an unwanted pregnancy becoming a criminal decline rapidly as the mother's age and education increase. Half of all abortions have virtually no effect on crime. The relationship between crime and abortion, they may be clarified by repeating earlier studies, but including only states with distinctively high and low teenage abortion concentrations. Also, the overall, for future studies, this study is not meant to encourage teenage abortion.
Pretty strong. There were a lot of great points, and it analyzed a lot of different facets of data. But there was definitely some room for improvement. So the first room for improvement was that this study could have been improved dynamically by ensuring that the data that they gathered was a lot more recent and modern. Most of the data that they gathered was from the DL data set, and that was from 2001 to around 2007. So it's pretty old, so data may have changed between 2007 and now when they released the article. So yeah, much more modern data probably would have made their study a lot more viable. And the second was increase the number of visual representations of their data and research. A lot of their visual representations that they have are very confusing, and they're hard to analyze. So you have to look very closely and really pay attention to what they're trying to portray with their visual representations. So increasing the number of visual representations and clearing up the visual representations that already exist would definitely improve their article and its results. And the last one was more labeling of the different components of their research. It becomes extremely confusing at times within the actual text of the article. Because there's not a lot of labeling, so it just kind of goes on, and there's data and words, and it's kind of hard to understand at times. You have to read it over a few times to understand what part goes with what label, because it kind of goes on and on at times. So if they could label different components of their research and have more sub-labels within their text, it would be much better.